Hey everybody, welcome back into Bayou Time. Harry McCulla with you, and it's how about a little change of pace? And we'll talk a little sports, and we're going to talk more specifically about being a sports agent. I thought this was pretty interesting stuff. Oscar Shoenfelt is an author of The Sports Agent, Up the Mountain and Down. Very interesting book. He was a lawyer, came out of LSU, he was out of Shreveport originally, went to LSU Law School, came out, was practicing law in New Orleans and in Baton Rouge, and then got into the sports agency business. You see the guy all the way on the left, that's Stanley Roberts. That's literally one of his big signees. He's had several others, but if you remember, Stanley played at LSU back in the late 80s and the 90s, and of course played with Orlando Magic and a lot of other teams. So he got together and had many years of being a sports agent, so we'd like to bring him in. Let's bring in Oscar, and thanks for joining us, Oscar. And you're in, let's start off. You're in North Carolina, and I was like, well, what are you doing in North Carolina? Did you retire? You had a different little detour over there to North Carolina.
Yes, it's been a long journey. I actually got diagnosed with a very rare heart disease 4 years ago called TTR amyloidosis. And basically, when I went to the computer and looked, well, how do you treat that? I looked at it and it said transplant. So you can imagine going from thinking at 63 that you thought you had a really great heart to thinking you might not make it in a year or two. That kind of gave me the impetus to write the book. I had been a sports agent and actually am still certified by the NBA Players Association. But I had a 2-year-old grandson, and I thought, if I don't make it, then it'd be nice to have something for him and any other grandchildren I may have. Actually, my 2 daughters are getting married this year. So I sat down and I thought, I had a lot of good stories from being an agent for 20 plus years. And they centered on the clients I assigned. And I just started this book over 3 years ago. And God willing, I got the published copy, which you're looking at, when I was in the hospital at Duke University to get a transplant. And I spent 50 days in the hospital and had the transplant, and I'm on the recovery right now up in Montreat, North Carolina, which is about 20 miles from Asheville and near a town called Black Mountain. I guess the most famous resident was Billy Graham, who had a house about half a mile up the mountain from it. So it's raining here, and it's much cooler than Louisiana, I'm sure.
Yeah, it absolutely is. I know the area well. I played in Asheville, North Carolina. So that's right around the area. So I certainly know that area, and it's a beautiful, beautiful area. I'm glad to hear you're doing good. You look great, and I would have never known talking about it. So over my years of playing, and then of course being on a TV on the side of talking to general managers and stuff, a lot of those guys would be surprised to know that agents had hearts. So that's a good thing too, right? So that's a joke.
I questioned that myself many times.
So let's talk about
one of the reasons why I eventually got out.
I got you. So you graduated law school in '79, and then you became an agent 9 years later. You were doing some malpractice, that kind of stuff early. What got you into being a lawyer? Being into an agent, and how did your background kind of work well with that?
Well, I basically had spent some time doing the political campaigns for John Breaux and Billy Tozan, so I felt like I could practice law. And in the firm I was with, I asked them if they would care if I went ahead and tried to be an agent. It's just something I always wanted to try. And someone once told me, you never know what you can do until you try it. And they also told me that just do one thing, every day to get in the business. So I basically did that and got certified by the NFL Players Association. I played football at Captain Shreve under Coach Lee Hedges, Billy Jack Talton, and had a pretty good knowledge of football. And I had practiced law and done negotiations, tried jury trials. My forte for 42 years was medical malpractice jury trials, which I think is probably one of the most difficult things, if not the most, that a trial lawyer can do. Because doing a jury trial, you can do everything perfect and still lose. So it's a matter of just doing your best. And I just slowly crept into it. I read an article about a couple of guys being agents, and it sounded fun. And, of course, I knew about Lee Steinberg and those kind of guys. So I got certified, and back then you didn't have to really do anything to get certified. You just paid some money and registered, and they did a background check. So I got certified in, I think, 1988, and I didn't sign anybody. I tried to recruit some guys, and 1989, I decided, well, I'd try to recruit a few guys. And I talked to Eddie Fuller and some other guys that you probably know from LSU, Carl Dunbar, who's a coach now,
Sure.
I think, for Pittsburgh, one of those NFL teams. And I didn't sign any of them, but I did manage to sign a guy named Ricky Warren from Graham. And he gave me a chance, and I'm always grateful for that. And he was going to be a free agent, but I was excited and worked up a video and got ready for draft day. And I actually talked to the Saints that called me. And on draft day, he got a free agent signing. So that was kind of my start. And then I picked up other players. I worked with Mickey Guidry on doing his book and working with him and playing in the WFL and some of the, I think, the other minor league at that time.
Yeah.
And picked up a couple other guys. And then I guess my biggest football breakthrough was Willie Williams, who played at LSU. And if you're fans, fans of the show, remember the great Eddie Fuller catch against Auburn. Willie had actually, I think, picked up a 4th and 8.
That kind of got you into being a sports agent, having some of those guys that had made it to the next level. And you talked about Mickey Guidry, who was the guy that went side by side with Tommy Hodson all those times. But then Stanley Roberts. Give me a good Stanley Roberts story, because as I recall walking around campus at LSU, I was like, this is a big tight end that's coming down the road. And then as a guy goes to him, like, this guy might be 7 feet tall. And he obviously was. I saw him with Shaquille O'Neal, and obviously then I knew who it was. He was a big deal at LSU and a good signing. How did you get to sign him?
Well, Stanley, I have to say, is he came from South Carolina, as you know. And there's the whole book kind of centers around 7 or 8 clients: Stanley Roberts from LSU, Irvin Johnson from UNO, Tim Breaux, who was from Zachary, who played at Wyoming, Mark Davis, and Damon Jones, who played at Houston, and then Darvin Ham, who is currently the first assistant coach at Milwaukee, when played at Texas Tech.
Right.
And Mark Davis, as I said, is from Thibodeau. So I kind of centered on those clients. And then, of course, the football players I had was Willie Williams, who was from Houston and played for LSU. And then Rufus Porter was really my best football player. And he played at Southern and made All-Pro. And so that's kind of the book moves through that. And it's also, from a lawyer's point of view, I had a lot of legal issues and things that came up, I think, far more than most attorneys, because I was representing Stanley. Stanley is a wonderful human being, a guy that has so much talent, and he played with Shaq. So there's a lot of stories generally about Shaq's in the stories, Dale Brown's in the stories. There's a lot of interest from Louisiana people, from the players that I represented. But I could tell the book has like numerous stories. If I can think of one. The story is, I guess, when I signed him, is I had met his high school coach. And I don't know if anyone recalls, but Chris Jackson had come out the year before, and Stanley was considering it. I didn't know this at the time, after they lost to Georgia Tech in the NCAAs. And I was really kind of unaware of all this. But the big impetus was that he became ineligible to play in August, which is past the NBA draft, which meant he would have to go overseas. And the overseas basketball market the teams were starting to play the next week. So something had to happen fast and quick. And I had never met Stanley, but I knew Jim. And all of a sudden, people had called me about this and inquired, well, what's happening with Stanley? And I was following it somewhat, and I'd actually read about European basketball somewhere. I read an article about Real Madrid. And the crazy part is that Stanley became ineligible. I said, Jim said, would you like to talk to him? I said, yeah, give me his number. I call him. I didn't think he'd want to come over or anything. Well, Stanley is the nicest individual, a human being in the world. He would give a shirt off to anyone, his shirt off and back to anyone. That may have been one of his problems too, but he's just a great guy. But so he comes over and I talked to him, and this is how naive I was at that point in time. I said, and he said, well, I might want to sign with you, whatever. And I said, well, you come back tomorrow and sign it. I want you to think it over. So I would never have done that a year from now or at that point in time. So he actually came back and signed. So I really met him on Tuesday, signed him on Wednesday. On Thursday, I had some other agents that I thought might be involved. This is all gone in detail in the book. And then on Friday, I get this call. Coach Dale Brown, who's talked about in the book and actually has read it and told me he thought it was terrific. That's a story in itself. I was in the hospital when he called, but Dale had referred a fellow by the name of Jaime Ibanez, who had flown with the general manager of Real Madrid over to sign Larry Johnson, who was at UNLV at that time.
Right.
Well, they couldn't sign Larry. I don't know why, but anyway, they called me on Friday and said, we're coming down to sign Stanley. So basically they got there on Friday. I met them, we had dinner, and to make a long story short, we signed the contract at about 11 that night, made fax copies, and he was signed for Real Madrid, one of the best teams in the world. And I was kind of flying by the seat of my pants there, but I'd had negotiations, and I detailed this, and those are the kind of stories. So we basically, I don't think I would have kept him due to the nature of the business if he had stayed in the United States more than another week. And I was about to sub-agency the deal out, but Real Madrid, Jaime, says, we want to deal with you and get this deal done. And there's a lot of more details. But anyway, that's a great Stanley story. And we've been together ever since, ups and downs. We've been to Greece together. We went to Spain. I was in there 3 times with him, and then we went to Turkey together. I had to go to Munich for a FIBA hearing in, I think, 1977, which is all detailed in the book. And same way with Irvin has a great recruiting story, and I'm sure people from your area know about Irvin Johnson, just a fantastic guy who didn't even go to play high school basketball. I know I can tell that story if we have enough time.
Yeah, he was at the grocery store in Baton Rouge when he signed and started playing for Tim Floyd. So let's talk a little bit more about being an agent, though. You mentioned, Lee Steinberg. He was obviously the subject of Jerry Maguire, the Tom Cruise flick. Being an agent is a lot more than just signing contracts. I'm sure you got to almost be part dad, part nurse, part friend, part a lot of things to these athletes, right? Who it's more than just show me the money, I would imagine.
Yeah, I actually have a chapter in the book which goes into details of the things you really need to do as an agent. As far as some travel arrangements, taking care of them, you actually become like a member of their family and take care of them unless you're certain agents. And I read Lee Steinberg's book, and it was done, his autobiography, I guess, was in 2007. It's a good book and well written, and he's got a lot of good stories in there too. I also read David Falk's book, and his book is very good from a negotiations and business point of view. One thing I didn't realize that he basically went from law school directly into having people like Dean Smith and Coach K and John Thompson recruit for him because he began working for Donald Dell. And I do detail recruiting is actually, I think, probably 75% of the job. And negotiation, one thing David said was some of the effect that you have to prepare for a negotiation like a jury trial, which would make me suspect he's never tried a jury trial, particularly a medical malpractice jury trial, which you really got to spend hours and hours, and months, getting ready. So, but I detail all that in the book. And again, the book is really tailored for anyone that likes sports, particularly NFL, the NBA, and I detail the collective bargaining agreements, the history of labor, and how the collective bargaining agreements came about, and trace the history of the NFLPA and the NBPA. which I was certified in both and still am certified as an NBA PA agent, and actually worked partially on a contract with another fellow this year. So I've been enjoying that, but I really stopped actively doing it in 2006 when Irvin retired. But yes, it's there's a lot. You really have to take over everything, and of course you always have to be careful of your client being poached, which is a detail. And the book is centered on the fact that I was a trial lawyer primarily, and I really took a lot of pride in that, and I did well with that. And at a certain point, you have to decide if you can actually be a sports agent. Now, I think God really blessed me in the fact that I signed Stanley and Irvin, 2 first-round draft picks within 2 years' time, and I think that's nearly impossible to do. And I just happened to have that thing with Stanley, as I said, just being there and getting out. And with Irvin, man, he was a different guy because this is a kid that didn't play high school basketball. He had not gone to the AAU system and gone through all he didn't look like a basketball player until he was actually maybe a senior or a junior at UNO, and Coach Floyd gave him a shot, and that's a story is detailed. Just incredible heart, and he went on to play 13 years in the NBA, just a great guy. And then Rufus is same kind of just hard working, and Willie played 3 or 4 years in the NFL, and that's kind of like what the typical player does. So my book is basically about people's lives and relationships, which, interestingly, when I was in the hospital, I think 90% of the people in the book gave me a call or sent me an email or let them know, Darvin and all those guys. So that was very rewarding.
Hey, Oscar, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but about 2 minutes left.
That's okay.
I wanted to ask you about what do you think the name, image, and likeness and the new NCAA rules, how do you think that'll change agents? Obviously, the game has changed for NCAA athletes.
Oh, I think it basically doesn't change the game that much. You can just have a legitimate reason to get in earlier as far as negotiating these contracts or these deals. And in reality, the agent business, since I have been familiar with what's happening now, having just done a contract partially, or had someone work with me on it, and I helped them, they helped me. But it's very competitive, and particularly in basketball, you can identify the players now. I mean, you're talking about kids 13, 14 years old being identified to play in the NBA. So I think that this is just a new avenue. As far as its effect on college football, I think that there aren't going to be a lot of kids that are making a lot of money. I mean, there's players in the NBA that don't get a lot of endorsements. If you look in reality, endorsement deals are mainly for the stars. So there are stars, obviously, and there are people who will pay them, some with the pretense of getting advertising, where it's actually just paying them. And I think the NCAA will have to make some kind of criteria as far as why you're getting paid and make you do something, just like the jobber program. I mean, we always hear about guys that were on the job getting paid, $20 an hour.
Now they can do it. Now they can do it and just publicize where they're going to go eat that night after the game. So I think that game has changed a little bit, and you're right. It's going to get earlier and earlier and earlier. So that'll be interesting to see how that all plays out. Hey, Oscar Shoenfelt, the author of Sports Agent, Up the Mountain and Down. It's been a pleasure. I enjoyed some of the stories. The book looks great.
Harry,
thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks a lot. And if you want to buy this book, it's at sportsagentbook.com. And I can actually sign it if you email me. My email is on the website. So please, sportsagentbook.com. Thanks, Harry.
Okay, Oscar Shoenfelt, thank you so much. Really looking forward to reading the book. We'll be right back on Bayou Time right after this.